Hi Tyranid fans and green stuff fans. I just wanted to show you in this video quickly how I've been using green stuff. Now, I'm by no means an expert and I'm only just sort of learning still at the moment. There's a lot of things that I would recommend doing that I'm not currently doing as sort of best practice really with green stuff. These are some of Richard's Tyranid, or the Shrikes I think they're called. The warriors with wings, Tyranid warriors with wings almost, and they just need a little bit. You can just see there's my little pointy stick just in the gap there. There's a little bit of a gap where the wings don't quite join on, so it's just a case of green stuffing in there. So this is one I've just done. I'll just quickly talk through a little bit of the process and show you some of the tips and techniques for using green stuff. As I said though, it's not something I can say I'm an expert in. So yeah, this is Richard's Tyranid warrior sort of body, and then these are metal, let me just get the camera to focus, metal wings off gargoyles. So it's a plastic miniature with metal wings. It's a little bit problematic for sticking them on because they've got that extra weight, but hopefully the green stuff will just add that little bit more stability and strength to the join. I keep my green stuff in a little airtight tub. I think that just maybe helps it keep a little bit longer. It does last quite a while anyway, but I would recommend keeping it in a tub so that it doesn't dry out. I've had green stuff before and it's not lasted as long because it's just been kept out in the open. So you always keep it in a tub. You can probably edit some of these bits out. So the green stuff comes in 2 strips. Now, as I said, I'm not an expert, but I'm assuming there's some sort of chemical reaction going on when you mix the two. I think one of them is probably like the, well, I'm not even going to guess. There's a yellow strip and a blue strip, and they make magic happen when you combine them.
Respect the chemistry.
Respect the chemistry. I don't understand the chemistry. So they come in strips like this. As I said, keep them stored away. And what you want to do when using green stuff, whenever you're cutting it or in fact working with any of your tools, is keep some water handy, because then when you go to cut the green stuff, it'll make it a lot easier to keep the blade wet so that it doesn't stick to your blade. Same with the modelling tools that you use, just dip them in water when you're using green stuff, because then it doesn't stick to your tools. I always end up making too much, but I do reason that I've always got more of it, and in fact if you make too much, that's not a problem. If you don't make enough and you're halfway through sculpting something, then it's a bit more of a pain. So I'm going to cut a little strip off. If you cut the strip off together, then you get the right amount of yellow and blue together. Just cut it. Now I would recommend doing it on some sort of surface other than your table. As I said, do as I say, not as I do. Just a scalpel, just dip it in the water and cut a little strip off like that. And then you should get the sort of right amount, approximate right amount of yellow to blue. And then what you want to do is smoosh it together. Now I just use my fingers. I think some people sort of use a little rolling pin or the end of a paintbrush or something to smoosh them together, but I just find that actually smooshing them together with your fingers is fine. So this just takes a few minutes to do, so I'm just going to do that and then show you sort of what it should look like after that.
And smooshing is that's the technical term for this stage of the process.
That's the technical term.
Smooshing. Good.
Yep. I'm using the sort of the expert jargon, so yeah, you need to look it up. That's fine. So this is sort of what it looks like once you've smooshed it together. It's really sticky, green stuff, and you can sort of see as I've been smooshing, there's fingerprints where I've been squashing it together. Now that is a problem you really want to avoid when you're actually sculpting things, because if you use your fingers to do it, you will get fingerprints and they will be quite visible. So if you want to avoid that, it's fine smooshing it together currently with your fingers and getting the rough shapes, but then you want to really avoid any fingerprints in the end result really. So you'd use some different modelling tools. Again, I'm not currently using any good modelling tools. I use a pair of tweezers just through the ends. Some of the different shapes you can get with the tweezers is fine. I mean, any household objects like pins and tweezers, scissors, knives should be fine. I mean, I think I will invest in some modelling tools because I think that make it a little bit easier. But yeah, I use mostly my scalpel and the tweezers, and then sometimes you can sort of use like the end of a paintbrush to sort of dab and flatten out areas.
So for those of you keeping score at home, that's probably 3 things now where it's do as Jonathan says, not as Jonathan is doing.
Yeah. And also I'm currently using just a bit of paper. I have replaced the table with the cutting mat, but I'm using a bit of paper and it will sort of stick to this as well. What I would recommend is either a sheet of like plastic from some sort of packaging, or maybe a ceramic plate, but with perhaps cling film on top so it doesn't stick to the plate too much, or a plate of glass would be quite good with some water on it so it doesn't stick. If you're rolling things out and making flat areas, a plate of glass with some Vaseline or water so that the green stuff doesn't stick to it. I'm not currently sort of rolling things out. I'm just going to use my fingers mostly to break pieces off. So yeah, I've got the Tyranid model here. I need to fill in that little gap in his wing there. I just cover over some of that area, so you want to break off a little piece of it. Now it does sort of dry out after a while, so you need to sort of work fairly quickly with it. You can just sort of re-smoosh it with some water to try and get it back to its sort of normal level. I'm going to break off a small piece, as I said, just with my fingers. Now again, this is a chance for you to count how many times I say don't do this, but in this instance I think it's okay because I'm going to sort of smush it into that corner. But if you're sticking some green stuff perhaps to another part of him, I would recommend putting some super glue on first and then super gluing the green stuff to it, and then you've got a little bit of a better join and the green stuff's more likely to stay there. For instance, I have repeatedly smashed the war boss pole, the boss pole off this war boss, and I have green stuffed. I don't know if you can see that little ring of green stuff there now to give it a little bit more stability, and I super glued that to it and then super glued the pole to it, so it's hopefully gonna stick a little bit better. If you take the small piece here then, and as I said before, with my fingers I'm going to smoosh it in because I'm not too worried about the fingerprints at the moment. But if you're doing a bigger area and you're using green stuff, I would recommend using the tools to place it and position it, because you don't want to get the fingerprints in it. You can use the tools just to sort of smooth out areas of fingerprints, and in fact you can sort of file down and chop green stuff once it's hardened. So if you've got some unwanted fingerprints or marks, you can sort of file it down and you can sort of cut it a little bit as well. So with the tweezers I'm just going to wet them just at the end and then just start to sort of position the green stuff with the tweezers, and you want to smoosh it in to all the different areas, and also start to think about what the final green stuff bit's going to look like. Now for these, it's not really a design I'm doing, it's more just covering the gap to make sure that there's a little bit of a better join. And again, I've not really used green stuff a huge amount, so I'm just sort of developing my sculpting skills. I used to do a little bit of art when I was younger, so some things like working with clay is the same sort of principles. So keep it wet, as you can see I've got some water on the end there. The green stuff itself is quite wet at the moment, so it doesn't stick to it and you're not pulling the green stuff off every time you try and touch it. So I'm just going to push it in a little bit further, make it a little bit of a better shape first. So you can use the different tools for the different jobs. Obviously with a scalpel, maybe a pin, you can push the green stuff into the little recesses. So I want to just get that join in there, fill in all the little gaps with the green stuff, and you can use the scalpel just to flatten flatten out areas using the side of it. What you want to try and do, or what I try and do, is make sure that the green stuff, if you can see on this one, is flush with the other parts of the model you're trying to incorporate into, so you don't have sort of a harsh join. You want to, and that's what you're going for, but you want to just make it flat with the rest of the miniature so it doesn't stick out too much. Now I think when you paint it, obviously it looks a lot better as well, and you can't tell as much where the green stuff starts and where the actual plastic starts. So just work around using, always with wet tools, just work around, flatten it out, get rid of any fingerprints that there are from when you first put it on, and just build it around. And once you've got the sort of shape right, so I've sort of covered up on most of the holes at the moment, looks a little bit better. Make sure that all the green stuff is pushed into the appropriate areas and you're filling up all the gaps, and then once it's a bit more flat you can start to work it into a bit more of a shape. Now maybe on these parts I'm going to do these perhaps as a part of his sort of chitinous plates, so that you can paint it up as the armour plates, but maybe it'd just be sort of like muscle as well. Not sure I'm actually on the camera there. So I'm just going to sort of push some little ridges in the side of it so that it can be painted as if it was a hard armoured plate. What I would say is that if you're keeping it nice and wet, to make sure the tools don't stick when it dries, just as on this other side has now, just make sure that there's no bits you sort of missed that the water was covering up, so you can just try and sort of smooth it out with the edge of a scalpel or with a modelling tool. As I said, I think probably the modelling tool is the way to go really. If you can get like some silicone ones, then they're probably the best to go for. So this is really just a sort of a covering job for the gaps, rather than sculpting a full-on new arm or piece of design for some armour. This is really designed just to sort of cover the gaps and make the wings fit a little bit more, but still look good as well. So hopefully once painted you won't really be able to tell as much that the wings have been joined on there. As I said, it's still sort of fairly basic and I'm still learning, but these are just some of the sort of tips I've picked up already. So I've got quite a few more to go, so I'll carry on using the green stuff. As I said, it'll start to harden, so you want to keep it sort of fairly malleable, maybe add a bit of water if you need to, and you want to work fairly quickly. As I said before about not making enough, equally you don't want to waste it, so you need to try and judge, and that's just through experience really, how much you're actually going to use to cover these little gaps in here. I mean, I'm going to use a tiny little piece of this, so out of this big chunk, maybe a bit more than that, but you're really only sort of taking small pieces, and you'd be surprised. Obviously these are quite small things we're working on at the moment, but you'd be surprised actually how far the green stuff goes. So maybe a small blob like that out of this one. I think this is easily going to be enough to do another 5 or another 6 Shrikes. I'll probably have some left over. I would try and do all your green stuff work in one go, so if you've got lots of models all that need green stuffing, try and do it all in one go. So if you have any left over after working on a certain unit, then you've got some spare to just perhaps work on the next bits as well. As an additional note, I would just say this isn't the correct way of doing it either. We've undercoated them using the green stuff because it just shows it up a little bit better and is easier to spot. Plus some of these Richard used from eBay purchases, so they've just been sort of reconditioned and reused, which is an excellent tip really for building your army. So yeah, what I would do is obviously green stuff and then undercoat, and then the green stuff is obviously undercoated as well, because it does need undercoating. You can't just paint onto it, much like the plastic needs undercoating as well. As another quick tip, what I would say as well is when I was making this guy's arm out of green stuff, which has come out alright, and I think it'll look good once he's painted, both of his arms actually. If you're doing something with green stuff, like making an arm or something that's holding up another part of the miniature, so his hand was stuck onto the green stuff arm, it's not quite strong enough to do that. It will slowly droop, so what you need to do really is just sort of like rest that part on something else, or I use whatever's nearby really. So if you want to just rest his axe or hand and that part of it on something else just to hold it in place, otherwise when it's drying, and I think it needs around sort of 24 hours to sort of dry, possibly a bit longer. The longer you leave it the better really, but over that time it will slowly droop, so just rest, for instance, his arm, if that was what was green stuffed on there, just to hold it in place so it doesn't droop. On this one, for instance, this one's wing has just come off, and we've just glued it back on and stuck it into the blue, I keep calling it blue stuff, the green stuff, and so it is going to start to droop, so you probably want to sort of balance him on his face while he's drying. As also you can see, hopefully, as I've been pushing it in, there's sort of a lot of sort of marks in the green stuff, which have come from sort of the edge of the scalpel and the edge of the tweezers. And what you want to try and do is perhaps use the edge of the tool that you're using just to flatten it down a little, so you get more of a smooth finish to it. You don't have sort of the marks of the scalpel and the tweezer. So again, some sort of modelling tool would be better, because that gives you a nice flat smooth finish. But you just want to be careful for any like digs or gouges in the green stuff, and then you can sort of smooth it out with the flat edge of a tool so it's a little bit smoother, and just go around and do that. Once everything's sort of in position, then you can go around and for instance smooth out all these bits just in there that need smoothing. What can be a good idea is if you just use a cocktail stick or something similar like a pin, which I've used before. You can just roll the cocktail stick along the green stuff, sort of similar to that, to smooth out any areas. So for instance on this bit there was a few dig marks from the scalpel, and then if you just roll it along like that, you can get some nice crisp edges like for the edge of that sort of plate, and then some smoother areas where you don't get any digs or marks that will show up. I've just finished the last of them, so that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, was it 7 shrikes? And with that first blob of green stuff I've got this amount left, so I still have a little bit left over. As I said before, it's probably better to have too much rather than too little, but I'll see if I can use that for something else just now. Towards the end, I mean, I don't know how long I've been doing it now, for probably about an hour or so. I've occasionally tried to add a bit of moisture by working some water into it, not too much though to make it too slimy. It's getting quite tough now, and I've actually another little point to make is that actually if you first put it on and get the rough shape with the green stuff as you first put it on, and then let it dry a little bit, then it is easier to work with once it's actually on there and sculpt, and it picks up some of the marks a little bit less when it's hard, and so things like fingerprints and marks from the scalpel that you're using, it's a little bit easier to use when it's dried a little bit. So let's just show you some of the sort of plates I've been trying to work on there, and as I said, it's just a sort of, this is a sort of a filling in of gaps, which try and make them sort of look like little hard plates or bits of muscle. And some of the marks are still there, so on that one you can still see a few of the lines on it, but with some paint over the top I think that'll soon disappear. And this one required a smaller amount of green stuff, but just to shape them into little plates like that to cover the gap. And then on this one I wanted to show you quickly as well just the shape of them. So yeah, that's some basic green stuff work, only very basic as I said, and it's more just sort of beginner level things really, rather than sculpting whole arms or anything like that, but it just gives you a bit of an idea. Obviously, as I said, when it gets a bit harder, it's easier to smooth out using the flat edge of a tool, just to roll it along and flatten it out. Especially on this one, as you can see, it's sort of quite smooth on that now. Like with the plastic, you can see the light on it there, just smoothed out a little bit and put some little digs in it like the rest of these armoured plates. So that is a little bit of an introduction to green stuff. As I said, very beginner sort of level things, but I would just encourage people to give it a try. Can't hurt. Well, I would say don't eat it, but other than that, I don't think it can hurt. And you'd be surprised, I think, about how easy and quick you develop your skills, and it's not something to be afraid of. So yeah, give it a try, and I think you'll be surprised.
Let me out of here!